And so what I recommend is investing in the friendships where you do see that other person is mutually invested in you. And so I differentiate between good friends and good company because to me good company is someone whose company you enjoy but has no responsibility to you, right? If you need someone to talk to when you're upset, they're not trying to show up, right?
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Dr. Marisa Franco, on the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. So before I go on to today's episode, I've been having very weird dreams this last few nights. I usually always remember my dreams when I wake up in the morning. But these ones were like really weird. Like one of them, it felt like such a waste of good prime time dream hour. I actually dreamt, so like I have a day job, and in my day job I'm an assistant, and one of the very tantalizing things that I do there is I schedule meetings, and so I'm in charge of the calendar. Anyway, so I dreamt one night that I was actually in the calendar. Like not even my calendar, not my calendar of what I need to do on the weekends, like podcast related, right? It's the calendar of my boss. I was in there looking at the meetings, and I can't remember what I was doing in there, but I was actually almost like I was in the Outlook calendar, like physically there, looking at the meeting. It was just weird. I was like, that, I don't know if that's okay. I don't feel like it's okay. So that's what's happened there. And then I also watched this movie on Netflix. It's not recent. It's a few years old. But it's a bit like, it's sci-fi, which I love. So I was in search of sci-fi, and I'm really running out because I've seen a lot on Netflix, that is. So I watched The Giver. I don't know if you've seen it, but I definitely recommend it. It's interesting how, basically what I got out of it was like how, it was really interesting to see how normalized something really cruel can become if it's something that everybody does. So obviously that's like it's obviously a topic that goes through all eras, right? It's like, like what we saw, what happened in the Second World War with the gas chambers, all those things that were so, people were just doing them like, oh, that's their job, and it was just, it's like when cruelty is normalized. So yeah, I mean, it's really good. It's not a scary film. It's kind of cute the way they filmed it and all of that. Because I liked that. I thought it was really good. And then I've been meaning to watch the movie called Interstellar, right? Because everyone keeps bringing it up to me. Watch Interstellar, is amazing. I watched the trailer, love the trailer. So then I ended up like I think it was on a Friday night or Saturday night. I was like, I'm going to treat myself to good food, and like I'm going to buy a movie online, which I never do. I just usually stream because I already get Netflix, right? So anyway, so then I was like, okay, let me put some money in and buy this movie. I bought it, watched it, loved it, but realized within like the first 2 minutes I'd already seen it, and I was like, oh, I've got to watch this film that I never saw, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old and forgetting things. But yeah, I watched Interstellar, really, really good, really loved it as well. Yeah, so that's it. I still think, though, that Arrival is probably better. Don't know if you've ever seen Arrival. It's crazy good. Really, really crazy good. It's not a sci-fi film. I do think that the... you gotta know what I mean if you've seen it, but like the octopus situation, it's a bit like... I mean, the fact that the film is still really good despite that, it says something about the film. Like, because the film was incredible. I just didn't like the octopus. Yeah, I'm going to let you watch it so that you know what I mean. Okay, so on to today's episode. Today's episode, we have Marisa Franco, who is coming on to talk about what makes someone a good friend, but also like what we can do to be a good friend. Because I think that many times we think that we're the one who's been wronged in our friendships, but there are really strong chances that even without realizing it, we are the villain in the story, okay? So Marisa brings some really good insights based on science and how our brain and attachment styles interpret things subjectively when it comes to our friendships, and just also just how to simply just like discern, good company with friendships, managing your expectations, what happens when there's an imbalance, what makes a relationship safe in your friendship, all of these things. So what ruins a friendship as well, we'll also go into that. So anyway, tons and tons of stuff. Really, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed talking with Marisa. And of course, listen, if you even just like this, just even a little tiny bit, please share with your friends. This really, really helps me. This really helps the podcast. The more you share it, the more you rate it, like give like a 5-star rating, leave a review, follow it. All of those things really help. So we have all of you to thank for this podcast growing and having more and more people listening to this. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So if you have just 2 seconds and you haven't done it yet, just do that now. Just give it a 5-star rating. Just scroll down on Apple Podcasts, give it a 5-star rating, a review, all of that stuff. So without further ado, please help me give a big warm welcome to Marisa. Let's begin. Welcome, Marisa.
Hi, Angie. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for joining me today. I've actually had my eye on you for a little while, probably about over a year. So you are definitely in high demand. I've been trying to get you on before, so I'm so glad that you saw my email this time. And so I'm just really, really happy to have you on, because I really want to talk about how to create friendships as an adult, especially after 40, because we are in a world where in the last few decades people have been uprooting, especially in the last 2 decades, and moved to different countries. And I feel that has really impacted my friendships, because that's been my situation. I've uprooted quite a bit as an adult. My friends have uprooted. My circle of friends in London, like the first 10 years I was here, all of the ones who weren't from here, like me, all of us who weren't from here, expats or whatever you want to call it, most of them have left the country. So I've had to experience how to rebuild friendships over and over again when I've been to new places. And because I like to have in-person friendship, as much as you can stay in touch now with people online, it's just not the same. You can't go for coffee with them. You can't go out. You can't do day-to-day stuff with them. So, and I think also because I know you talk about friendships for adults, I wonder as well if obviously with age, we're getting more fussy. I certainly am. I'm getting more and more fussy who I spend time with. And so I have tons of questions for you on this topic. And I know you have a book called Platonic on the science of attachment in friendships. And it has a couple of titles, one in the UK, one in the US, but it's called Platonic. And, you know a lot of stuff around this. And so before we dive in, Marisa, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Angie. I am a professor, a speaker, and author of Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. And my expertise specifically is on friendship.
And where are you based?
I'm based in Washington, D.C. in the U.S.
Yeah. And can I just actually quickly ask you what got you into this line of work at all? I'm quite curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, it was in my young 20s, feeling like I valued romantic relationships so much that my sense of my own worth was really tied to how my romantic relationships were going. And when they weren't going well, I started this group with my friends called a wellness group, where each week we met up and we did yoga, we meditated, and it felt so healing because I had regular community. And it started to lead me to really question some of the ideals that I was brought up with. Like, why does romantic love make me complete? Why doesn't platonic love matter? Like, this love should matter. It does matter. And I can feel lovable because I have all this love around me, whether or not it's romantic. So I kind of realized that there's larger cultural issues around friendship and how we deprioritize it and kind of make it a second-class relationship. And I wanted to be part of changing that.
Yeah, especially, we all know the friends, and I've been guilty of that when I was younger, where when you get into a new relationship, romantic one, you forget your friendships. And then the breakup comes, the inevitable breakup arrives, and you're like, fuck. And so when I learned that lesson the first time, I was like, never again. And now
Right.
almost like I really like up my game when I enter a new relationship, because I want to up my game with my friends, because I want to make sure that I don't unconsciously sort of forget them. I not forget them, I don't forget them, but don't like neglect that time, quality time with them, because it's so important. As much as you have to build that cocoon with your new romance, you have to build on that too. But friendships, like, it tend to last a lot longer than romantic relationship in this day and age. It was interesting that you brought that up, actually. If there was a definition of friendship, do you have one that you've created? Like, what does friendship mean to you?
Yeah. Hmm. There's a couple that have swirled around my head. One is like an acquaintance is someone you know of, and a friend is someone you know.
Yes.
And I also like thinking of friendship. I think one thing we get wrong about friendship is that we see it as like good vibes only. It should never be stressful. It should never be hard. And one way that I like to kind of look at friendship is it's a responsibility and a commitment, just like any other type of relationship, just like any other form of intimacy. And so when you're agreeing to be friends with someone, you're also agreeing to help support them in times of need, to want the best for them, to root for them to succeed, all of these things that are part of healthy relationships.
So when you say, obviously, like, some people, they go, oh, it's just, the good vibes only. What are the things, is there like maybe like a line of when you know that this is just a friendship that, you need to commit time to, like, you want to be there, support your friend, and so on. There must be a line to when is that, obviously they're going through a rough time, which we all go through.
Yeah.
A line between that and then when actually that friendship is draining you dry, it's toxic, it's not good, they may not value you the way you value them. Like, are there like signs, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in these sort of toxic friendships, we see a breakdown of something called mutuality. Mutuality, it's not the same thing as reciprocity. Reciprocity, we think if I do this for you, you do this for me. Mutuality instead says, I'm considering your needs and my needs, and we're making a decision that's best for the both of us at any given time, right?
Yeah.
So that means when my friend has a new kid, maybe I'm expecting less out of the friendship than I would at times when they have more time, right?
Yeah.
But when in toxic friendships, there's a breakdown in mutuality. One person is usually getting their needs met all the time, and the other person isn't getting any of their needs met. And one person doesn't have regard for meeting the other person's needs. So, just an example in my book, there was this woman that I interviewed, and she told me that she got very sick and she couldn't go to a friend's dance recital. So, she told her friend, and her friend was like, you're an awful friend. You abandoned me.
Oh.
Clearly that friend was upset,
Yeah.
right? Which is okay. But that was a breakdown in mutuality because she's only considering her needs and not considering the needs of both parties at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm thinking of someone in particular where planning something with her, because sometimes, like, too far in advance, was sometimes a bit stressful for me, because I knew that if I had to cancel for any reason, she just would take it so personally, even if it was
Mm-hmm.
because I had to work, or if I was sick, or because I actually had a reason.
Mm-hmm.
um it's that lack of considering that maybe the other person has a life,
Yeah.
and so I would then, going forward, I would never cancel, because I was just like, but then it's just, it's that pressure that you feel.
Sure.
I guess it's also when you mentioned about getting your needs met, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting one, because obviously, like, I understand that, but there was also, I guess, what. So let's say we were in a friendship. Let's say we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
Your needs, I may not know what your needs are. You may not know what mine are, and my needs may seem really important to me. So it
Yeah.
could be, for example, for me, I have a need to. There has to be, like it can't just always be on your grounds. Like you're like if I'm always traveling to you, if I'm always communicating, so let's say I hate texting, but if the only way of communication for you is texting, that's all you want to do,
Yeah.
and you know that I would maybe like to have a phone call every once in a while, especially we talk about personal stuff. I don't need that to be on text,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, and you just consistently like not meet me in the middle. That to me, that's a need that's important to me. But I know that it's not unless I express it, the other person doesn't know it.
Mm.
And you may have a need that I've no idea that it's important to you, or I don't think it's important. And so, like, I guess, how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are, I think, subtle ways that we can address these things in friends. Like, for example, Angie, in your story, if there was a time your friend met you halfway, being able to say, I really appreciate you being willing to go out of your way to like meet me halfway. Like, it's important to me to like find a middle ground. So I just wanted to say thank you. Right. So we acknowledge the good. That's a way of voicing a need that can feel less threatening. Cause I think the sort of liability in friendship is that people scripts around friendships or that there should be no needs, which is just like that's not how you have an intimate relationship. So I really like valuing the good. I would also think about are there creative ways to get this need met in the friendship? So for example, I have a friend that she's not very good at reaching out, and it hurts me to be the only one that ever reaches out. So
Yeah.
we just schedule a once a month phone date, and that's on the calendar. Nobody's reaching out and it's already there. And so I think that's a really good that can be a good way of addressing it. But third, like, you can bring it up and you can just say like, hey, I really value our friendship, and when I notice I've been the one reaching out the last couple of times, and it would mean so much to me if you might be willing to reach out too. Would that be
Mm.
something that you're willing to do?
See, that's interesting that you brought that example because I'm terrible at reaching out. Like, and I notice it as well, but I find it really, yeah.
Yeah.
But because now how do we reach out on text? And I hate texting. To me,
Yeah.
it's a real effort. And I have friends who are really good at like, they'll make a really nice text, but I just want to get straight to the point.
Yeah, I feel you on that.
And it's like, it's just, yeah. So, I mean, that is something I now have to pay attention because I'm sure it pisses off a lot of my friends because they must feel like I'm only reaching out whenever it suits me or whenever I think, do
Hmm.
you know what I mean? And they think I don't think about them probably. Like, I'm sure like it's not landing well on some
Mm,
people. And it's not actually how I feel. I actually miss
right.
them. I miss them, but I'm just not reaching out because I'm like, unless I have something to say or to ask, it's difficult for me. Yeah. Um, so how do you know the difference between, because you talked about earlier about expectations, and I know you've got
Mhm.
an article on your website about maybe like we overvalue our friends, and we because I know sometimes my disappointments in friendships have been because I had my expectations were too high, and
Yeah.
I thought that the love I had for that friend was reciprocated. I thought that we were like besties, and
Mhm.
turned out that we were not, and that actually like it is a really it's a very disappointing feeling, right? So you basically, I'm upsetting myself because it's my expectations that are basically letting me down, right? It's not actually the
Yeah.
person. The person is just being who they are, and I'm sure I am that for someone else too. I'm 100% sure. Like some people are really disappointed with me because they feel I'm not probably reciprocating because I don't actually feel that deep of a connection with them, right? So,
Right.
so how do we manage those expectations so that we understand the difference between friendships and good company, right? Because I think you can have, here in the UK they call a mate, in French we say copain copine, you said acquaintance, right?
Hmm.
So between that and then an actual friend.
Yeah, that's a great question. And first of all, I just wanted to mention that according to a research study, approximately half of our friends don't consider us friends. So yeah,
Interesting.
it's a very normal experience where you think we're
Yeah.
great. They're like, and vice versa, right? I think
Right.
Angie, a
Yes.
lot of people could probably relate to you. Um, And so what I recommend is investing in the friendships where you do see that other person is mutually invested in you. And so I differentiate between good friends and good company, because to me good company is someone whose company you enjoy, but has no responsibility to you, right? If you need someone to talk to when you're upset, they're not trying to show up, right? If you share good news with them, they're not excited for you per se, they don't respond to you when you need them. It's kind of like very opt in and opt out. You enjoy their company, you like them as a person, but whenever you have a need, they're not really responsive to it. Or even if you like want to hang out, right? They're not necessarily open to that all the time. It's maybe seems like it's very much on their time. And, I see this especially in a lot of male friendships because I think men's scripts on friendships are, more focused around doing things together, right? Rather than having a responsibility to one another, right? Having to
Yeah.
support one another and show up for one another. And so I encourage people to lean into those relationships where they're actually a good friend to you, right? They follow through on what they say. They show up for you in times of need. It seems like they're rooting for you to succeed. Maybe there's a level of mutual investment there. Rather than those people where you're like, I actually like them and I really enjoy their company, but like they're not actually being a good friend to me, right? Like just because you enjoy your time together, that shouldn't necessarily be the only indicator that you should pursue a friendship with this person, because it's an act of love to yourself to choose relationships where people are choosing you back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting that you said that, because for me, like, I can see how it's easy to go the more lazy route, right? Where basically you enjoy that company, so you invest more in them, but they may not be an actual friend, but you just enjoy the company. Whereas the other one may feel a bit more harder to connect with. Because I think,
Yeah.
like, for me, like, I love the feeling of a deep connection with someone. I hate the chit chat. I hate like it's like, for me, a friend is someone we can just go anywhere. We don't have to go anywhere fancy to have a good time. We could just usually hang out at each other's house or go to a coffee shop and have coffees all afternoon, and the conversation flows, and we talk about things that matter. We challenge each other on maybe misconceptions one of we may have on things on life, and we can actually talk about things that maybe be even a little bit like a danger zone, like they're not PC. It's not the conversation you have with your boss, where everything is like correct and all of that stuff, and the right thing to say, but you go in and you really go deep and actually question different things, like, so those are the ones that interest me. But I found that it has happened quite a few times where those relationships, I realized, and also laughing a lot, like laughing is important to me, but it's like, and I have actually, this is where it's been so disappointing, where sometimes those connections I've realized were not reciprocated,
Yeah.
because for me, quality time is important in person. That's what that Because I know I'm terrible at text. I can't connect with someone if I haven't seen for them in a while. It's very hard for me to connect with them on text. So email,
Yeah.
I can't do it. So, like, if I was to then, but now I've become a lot more like, even if those relationships are not reciprocated, I take a step back.
Yeah.
And if they really make me feel really shitty, I actually step all the way back now.
I think that's a great approach.
But it's hard because you want that I mean, I want that
Of course.
connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you have that chemistry and you would
Yeah.
love to
Yeah.
continue to amplify it. But I will also say the beauty of friendship is that it's such a spectrum, and you can have friends that are in your closest intimate circle that, feel as close to you as your spouse or your parent or whoever you're very close to. Or you can have those people that are more like acquaintances where there
Mm.
is less expectation. So it's, I think we also don't have to see friendship as so absolutist or binary that, like, okay, if they're just good company, I can ask them out of my life. It might mean, okay, at what level do I want to keep this good company person in my life, right? That would make me not feel as hurt. Maybe I reach out to them every other month or something, and I keep them in my life, but sort of on the fringe. But I would just say, for your most intimate circle, you want to lean into those people that are giving you that mutual investment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I have those friends, especially male friends, where we see each other like twice a year for a big party. They're just like, they're like the party boys. And
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
known them for 2 decades, like we've seen each other's evolution. It's quite funny, but we're still completely stupid when we go out.
Yeah.
So, and those I'm fine to see. Like, I used to be a bit upset that I wouldn't see them more, because we used to see each other a lot more when we were younger, because, you know, more energy, you go out more. But now those days are over for me.
Same,
I'm too
same.
busy. so, but I'm okay with not seeing them as much, and not, I don't feel like, oh, they're not in church or that kind of stuff. Like, I've sort of let go of that. But yeah, you're right. It really is. It seems, it sounds very much like when the advice I get when I go dating.
Yep,
You know,
same thing.
like, you know,
Hmm.
don't go straight. Like, if it's an instant, like, you feel like, wow, instant attraction, instant crush, like, what's the feeling underneath? Are they making you feel anxious? Are you like confusing passion with anxiety? And I wonder if that's
Right.
a little bit the same with friendship, because sometimes there is like that status difference where it's always on that other person's terms. Oh, that was the word I was looking for, on their terms, right? And that's how also, like, imbalanced dating can become. You know, you feel like you have to do everything that they do, listen to the music they listen to, you know, that really
Hmm.
terrible codependency pattern, right? So I
Hmm.
wonder if it's the same a little bit with friendship. Maybe we have to check ourselves a little bit, that if it's an instant friend crush, is it because actually it's like a wound attachment? You're basically going to be
Mm.
codependent, and that person is actually gonna just use you and spit you out. You know, I don't know. Like, if, I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds like people are terrible. I don't mean it that way, but you know what I mean. Like, is that maybe like a something that some of us have to look out for?
Yeah, I think it's really great to be discerning. And I also think you're right that, our wounds with usually our parents early in life when our nervous system is really forming, that I think we understand that those can affect our romantic relationships, right? I think that, a lot of people talk about attachment theory related to your romantic partnerships, but really those can play out in friendships too, right? Like, if you're afraid that people don't really like you, for because of your attachment style, that could play out in friendships. If you need a lot of space and distance because you're avoidantly attached, that can play out in friendships. Like, your friends aren't, I think sometimes we like to think of friends of this, like, I guess, like this blank slate where we all just have fun and, all of our baggage is pushed to the side. And sometimes if it's a more distant friendship, but in your more intimate friendships, certainly those triggers can still come up.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because especially friendship breakups, it does feel like a breakup. It's never an easy thing, like, to do that friendship breakup, you know, like that. Um, or when someone's crossed the line over and over again, and
Yep.
nothing is changing despite you know, speaking up. And something that I value in someone else is that if I tell them, look, I feel like, for example, I'm always traveling your way, we're always doing things on your terms, etc., etc. Like, I would love, like, if we just and if we could just, like, even if we just meet in the middle, that would make me really happy. Like, I just feel it'd be a bit more balanced.
Hmm.
And if they go, oh, yeah, I get it. Like, I didn't even realize. I just thought, you know, because obviously their place is usually like nicer stuff, you know, and which, you know, fair enough, you know. And it's like, and I live a bit far away, so, but it's still a long way for me to travel still. So it's like,
Yeah.
then, but then the reaction is like, yeah, I get it. Like, we'll try and make an effort. And actually, if that doesn't change, whether if we still bring it up, then I'm like, okay, nothing's changing. Or but if they're making an effort, then I value that. And there's always a difference, because some people will just go, well, then we're not friends anymore. Like, if they have that instant reaction. It happened to me once, and
Hmm.
I was like shocked, because this was like a really, really, really long friendship. But because we'd been friends for so long, I hadn't really never realized those things or been very acutely aware. But yeah, I think it's also how that person receives your boundary, because if someone tells me what they need or what their boundary is, I would want to know, because I don't want to be the one upsetting them without even
Hmm.
realizing it, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's healthy to be responsive to other people's needs. And it's healthy to bring stuff up, right? Like, I that was something that I really struggled with in my friendship, until I wrote this book, and I came across the study that found that if you can have open, empathic conflict, it's actually related to deeper intimacy in the relationship.
If you can have open and what conflicts?
Empathic.
Uh-huh. Can you explain how that would look like?
Yeah, so that looks like, just like you shared, like, not blaming the other person, not attacking the other person, just like observing the issue and then stating how it feels for you and then getting their perspective on it and then figuring out what to do moving forward. So, for example, like, hey, yeah, I noticed when we hang out, I'm usually coming all the way to you. It would mean a lot to me if you were able to meet me halfway somewhere. Like, would that be okay for you? right? Like just
Yeah.
that, something as simple as that. So, what I realized in my own process was that, I'm actually harming my friendship by not bringing up this conflict. I thought I was trying to save the friendship by keeping things
Yeah.
at peace. But since I've been able to start having those conflicts, I think, Angie, you're right. Inevitably, some people will fall away, those people that are not used to having that level of openness, or maybe have their own triggers around conflict, or maybe have a script for friendship that it's just, again, this lighthearted relationship where no one has needs. But
Yeah.
for other friendships, and I would say for most of my friendships where we started to talk about issues, you can access a deeper level of intimacy. There's this psychoanalyst, Virginia Goldner, and she talks about the difference between flaccid safety, which is the safety we experience when no one brings up issues, versus dynamic safety, where you can rupture and repair and rupture and repair. And
Yeah.
that dynamic safety brings you so much more intimacy, because then, if there's ever an issue between us, we could actually heal this and solve it. And it doesn't have to always be there pulling us apart.
Yeah, it's funny because there are some friendships I really miss, because they've the ones I was bringing up earlier where they were here when I lived my first 10 years in London. There was one friend in particular, because we were younger as well. Things were just, I feel like things were more natural. I don't know. We were seeing each other a lot more. We'd lived together as well in a period of time. But one of them, I remember, like, we get on really well. We had a lot of fun together, but we were also there for each other, like in a real way, like properly there for each other. And I remember there was one time where she was staying with me, and so we were seeing each other every day, and we were starting to get on each other's nerves. But what would happen is that we'd have an actual blow up, and sometimes it was in public. I remember one time was like we were out in a club, and because it's loud music, the blow up was, we were really loud because we couldn't hear each other. We were very young. But the thing with us is that we'd have a blow up, and then literally within 2 seconds of it being over, we were good friends again. There was no residual anything. There was no resentment. There was no, I can't believe how you spoke to me. None of that. It was just like blow up, ready, done. That's it. Bam.
Yeah.
And it was something that it was so refreshing, and I really appreciated it, because I find that in so many relationships, and I don't know how to have that anymore, but I think it's also it's a dynamic, right? I think friendship, like with dating, it may not necessarily be that one person is bad, the other person is good. It's not because one person is toxic. It's basically the dynamic is either work well and you've built on it, or it's just the dynamic is not good. There's an imbalance. The dynamic is toxic. The person is not. It's just a dynamic,
Yep. Yeah.
Very rarely are people really mean, like very rarely are they actually really out there to get you.
Yep.
And so, but I miss that. And oh gosh, I wish I had that, like, more, because it's so easy. You're allowed to have your anger out,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even bad. It was just like, yeah, I'm really annoyed. I feel like every time we do this, you expect this of me. And I'm just like, I'm tired. It was just like that. It was like really. And she was like, but I don't expect that of you. Like, da, da, da. And we were like, oh, okay, fine. Okay, well, then we're good. And then we go and get another drink at the bar. And it was just so, it's simplicity of when we're younger. I don't know if that's that or, but yeah, I would love to get back to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It seems like you were able to really kind of clean out the issues in the friendship so that they didn't continue to build.
Yeah, I don't really have that anymore. I need to rebuild that, I think.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
Yeah, I really do. And I guess talking about that rebuilding and stuff like that, how do you have any sort of advice in terms of, especially I think now, like after the pandemic and all of that stuff, like I think a lot of people, they've moved out from where they've been. I think of people, like I know people who've moved out of London like in the last 2 years, and they've been out to the countryside or by the seaside, that kind of stuff. They just want a different life. And so I think a lot of us are out here rebuilding a little bit, or adding to a circle of friends and acquaintances. And so how do you create new ones, maintain existing ones, sort of nurture existing ones? Like, how do you create and build friendships?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of our biggest issues when it comes to this is that we tend to think friendship happens organically. And according to the research, if you think friendship takes no effort, you're more likely to be lonely 5 years later. Whereas if you see it as taking effort, you're less likely to be lonely 5 years later. So you really need to take it upon yourself to put yourself out there and meet people and make friends. Now, how do you do that? I suggest, so there's a sociologist, Rebecca Adams, and she says for friendships to happen organically, you need continuous unplanned interaction and shared vulnerability. That's like what we have in school, right? That's why it's easier when we're kids. Just like it's more like we have a scheduled time to see each other regularly, like what you'd get in school, for example.
Oh, planned. Okay, well, I see, yes.
Yep.
And then what was the second one you said?
Shared vulnerability. So we're letting our guards down. We're sharing more of who we are.
Yeah.
So you can use this to your advantage by signing up for some sort of group that meets continuously over time and that gives you that sort of infrastructure. And if you go sign up for something that's repeated over time, you'll capitalize on something called the mere exposure effect, which is our tendency that's completely unconscious to like people the more we're exposed to them. So likely when you just meet people,
it's like Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. That's a funny way of putting it. Yeah. So likely when you just meet people, you're going to feel a little weary of them. That's normal and that's natural. But if once you continue to be exposed to them, you feel a lot more comfortable. You like them more. They like you more. And then once you find someone you like in that group, just ask them like, hey, you want to meet up, have lunch before we join this running club, or, have tea after our book club. Make that ask. And yeah, then you're well on your way to friendship.
Yeah, that I love that you said about make the ask because it is so important that to actually, it's you have to actually come out of your shell a bit.
Yep.
and ask. And I feel like in a way, because I've mentioned this on the podcast, that I've gone back into full-time work, and for a few reasons. There's a few reasons why I went back into full-time. I used to work part-time and then ad hoc, and then the pandemic hit and stuff like that. Anyway, so now I'm back full time. And one of the reasons, other than, one of the reasons actually that I really needed to get back into full time was the social aspect, interacting with other people.
Right.
And have a structure. And I've realized that actually it's been really refreshing to see. It's quite big companies. I don't always see the same people, but often I see the same people 2-3 times a week when I go in, and then I work from home the rest of the time. And it's that social aspect that I've actually missed from being part of something more continuously, and because I need to see people in the flesh. Really, it's something that I really value that so much. And so and I've noticed that doing that is actually being back into a more social environment on a daily basis, is that I actually realize I have to make a lot more of a concerted effort to communicate. And it's actually been a great exercise, because when we are isolated, when you do a podcast and things like that, when you do everything online, I feel like I've missed out a little bit on the whole building and communicating those relationships,
Yep.
And so I think something it was something that I was missing. And it really is, you have to make an effort. And now I can really see in the office who's having a harder time because they're not actually communicating,
Right.
and who's having an easier time because they're communicating. And it really is, sometimes it looks like it's that simple. It's just really that difference between having a good experience and not so great experience.
Right. It's opening up. I guess it's, being more vulnerable. Yeah, I think, people struggle with that. And, one thing that I share with people who are looking to make friends and connect with people, and I think this relates to vulnerability as well, is the importance of assuming people like you, based off of research on a phenomenon called the acceptance prophecy, which is jargon, but it means that when researchers told people they would go into a group and be accepted, even though that wasn't true, people became open, more agreeable, friendlier, and they actually end up being more accepted. Whereas people that fear rejection, they tend to close off, they withdraw, they reject other people, and then they get rejected because people are like, well, I don't want to get rejected approaching this person who's so closed off and withdrawn. And so that's why, I say, like, who's the people that are most likely to reject you? It's probably the people that fear the rejection the most, because they're protecting themselves and coming off as rejecting you. So that's why it's really important, I think, when you're taking the risks of intimacy, of connection, to be optimistic and to assume that, maybe this will turn out for the best, because that actually changes the reality, because it affects how you show up in the interaction. And that's also true for vulnerability. According to the research, there's a phenomenon called the beautiful mess effect, which basically finds that when we're vulnerable, we overestimate how much people will judge us for it. We underestimate how positively they'll see us when we're vulnerable. And in fact, other research links, the more vulnerable you are, the more people actually like you. So we also have this misconception around vulnerability that I have to be polished and strong and closed off, right? Otherwise people won't like me. But in fact, then people don't actually feel connected to you, and they actually prefer if you can open up a little bit and share with them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You've dropped a few truth bombs right there. And I love the example of, if you expect to be accepted, you're gonna have a better experience, because if you expect to be rejected, you're gonna have all that energy and you're gonna be defensive and all that stuff. I mean, I can base that on. I don't even know if I should go there in that conversation. But I'm thinking of like two guys I dated, and how one of them was like, so they both had the same background and the same heritage, right? But they one of them grew up in France, one of them grew up in Britain. He was born and bred here. The other one was born and bred in partly in France and partly somewhere else. But I remember the experience with both of them was different. Not as in dating, but one of them, I remember he was always expecting people to have a negative reaction towards him.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Like I remember sometimes he'd tell me a story and he'd be like, and he was like, wow, I was already waking up and imagining this and this and that, and he was already being negative or something that wasn't actually happening. But sometimes it was happening. Sometimes there was actually a negative experience that had nothing to do with him being positive or negative. Things are what they are. There's obviously issues out there, absolutely. But he was sort of almost like expecting it all the time, continuously. And whereas the other person, I remember he was saying to me, he was pointing out the chip I had on my shoulder with my heritage. And he was saying how, he said to me, I don't ever expect to have any issues. I expect all the time that people are going to like me and accept me. He literally said that to me. So it was really funny when you said it. And he said, when I go to a club, I always expect I'll get in. And guess what? I always do. And I remember like hanging out with him and dating him, going out was such a different experience. And I could see how different his energy was because of his expectation and how his experience would be so different.
Exactly.
And it was like, and I get it because I've had the chip on my shoulder, and so I like it's, but obviously I mean I don't want to compare because it's very different for me, but versus to them, like for them it was more serious. But yeah, so I think that so that was really interesting, and so I think that's a very good tip to have as well for when you walk into a room or go to this new thing, whether you're gonna go and learn how to play volleyball and you're going to see these people every week to practice. Expect they're going to like you. Is there anything that that people do that are like, oh man, don't do that, because that's like, those are the worst things that people do that ruin a friendship?
That's a great question. When it comes to friendship, I think of something called diagnostic moments, which are moments that matter more to people when they evaluate how good a friendship is, right? Like, not when we evaluate whether a friendship is good for us, we don't count all moments in the friendship equally. We will count more so those moments when we're in need and did that person show up for us. So it's particularly important when your friend is going through something difficult that you're very intentional about reaching out for them, trying to show up for them, doing what you can for them. Because they're really going to remember that. So don't be passive, I would say. Don't be passive when your friend is going through something. Make sure you reach out to them and make them really feel cared for. The other thing that I think we do wrong is we avoid conflict in friendship. And we think that it's good, like I talked about my own journey. But in fact, what happens over time is that resentment builds and we end up withdrawing, and we're afraid to to harm the relationship by talking about the issue, but we just harm the relationship anyway. And then the destruction's more guaranteed because we didn't even give our friend a chance to talk about it. So I think that's something we also do wrong too. And then lastly, I think this is especially for, my book is on attachment theory, people that are more insecure and securely attached. They tend to think so much more about how people are impacting them. Is this person reaching out to me, making me feel welcome, making me feel included? But they don't think as much about how they're affecting and impacting people, right? Am I being a good friend? Am I making this person feel loved, cared for? Am I initiating? So I think for us to be intentional about not just thinking about how our friends slighted us, but hey, what have I done in this friendship? How have I showed up? Have I made this person feel cared for? Have I made them feel like they belong?
Yeah, no, you're so right. And it's like I feel like, I mean, I've realized that I feel like I've probably haven't been as good of a friend the last few years. I said a few years. I don't know how, maybe not that long, but I feel like I haven't necessarily nurtured friendships. And I wonder if it's just because I feel like I've been disappointed or I'm tired of people leaving, because London is quite transitional as a place.
Yeah.
I mean, even British people leave London and move outside because it's too expensive to buy here, for most people. So, and yeah, I had to have a really, really hard look at myself. And I was just like, I haven't actually, I don't think I have been a good friend. And it's like, I really need to, and just because I feel, texting is hard and I don't know how to connect, that's not a good reason enough anymore. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, especially in this day and age, not everybody has got the time. I don't have the time. Like, it's very hard sometimes to find the time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have to prioritize it more and be more aware of my pattern, because actually I haven't always been the good person that I thought I was,
Yeah.
But I wanted to actually ask you two things based on this question about the bad things that we do. I saw on your Instagram, you talked about something about how when they're doing friendships where they say they do something and they expect the same thing in return or something like that. And I remember I commented on it and we talked on Instagram, and I said, it's the poison chalice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk on that a little bit?
Are you talking about like reciprocity?
Yeah.
Can you say more?
So for example, okay, a typical poison chalice. Let's say if we were friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're on my podcast, right? And then and so let's say you start off like this huge podcast is like super, super popular or whatever, and you're not inviting me on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I got you on mine. Why am I not getting on yours?
Right. Yeah.
That to me, that's a poison chalice. And it doesn't have necessarily to be part of a friendship. Maybe it's not the great example, but it's that thing where someone does something for you, but it comes with an obligation. So I actually scrapped the example I gave earlier.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've got people like that. I've met people like that who they do something and you feel obligated. It's a weird thing. It's like you would actually do it if you didn't feel obligated.
Exactly. Yep.
But you end up doing it because you're going to get into more trouble by not doing XYZ, whatever it is, because and it's a weird dynamic.
Yes, absolutely. In the research, this is something called egoistic giving. And it means you're giving from a place of ego because you want something back, not just because you love that person, right?
Yeah.
And egoistic giving, it can be really harmful even for the giver, because people often offer this type of giving to people that they kind of want to earn their love, I would say. They want something from them. So it's not people that necessarily want to be your friend. It's people that you're trying to I think manipulate sounds like such a negative, underhanded word, but I think this is completely unconscious and doesn't necessarily involve this manipulative intent. But yeah, to get them to like you, right? Whereas, like I said, we should pursue friendships with people that like us and that want to be our friend instead of trying to get them to be our friend. And the problem with egoistic giving is first that people can sense it. And they, generally generosity can really nourish friendships. But when people give egoistically, the receiver does not appreciate it and does not feel closer to you because they sense that. And the other thing is being generous is really good for us. It's good for our mental health and well-being. But when we are generous because we feel obligated, it's actually worse for us than not being generous. Like it makes our mental health worse. And so it just really changes the flavor of giving when we're not doing it very freely.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like it's something that I witnessed on The Real Housewife of Salt Lake City. Do you watch Real Housewives?
I do. I watched Atlanta, the first season.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's something that you see on I haven't watched Atlanta in years actually. But yeah, so I don't know if they do that on there, but like in Salt Lake City, and I think maybe a little bit on Beverly Hills, but definitely Salt Lake City, you see some of them, there's one, there's one episode where basically one person who really acted badly towards a friend tried to make up for it, so she then basically got like a personal shopping. It's like, you know, Manolo Blahniks, you name it, like really expensive stuff where the person could just basically pick and choose tons of stuff so basically it's a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. But then the minute that person has then chosen, her friend has then, you know, received her gift, if you like, the giver of the gift then just went into a whole rant about how that person is not a good friend, how she should have done it, and basically destroys her.
Wow.
And it's like, and she's like, and I gave you all of this, I'm generous, you know?
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
Reaction.
Exactly.
And you're like,
bring it
wow.
back.
I was like, I'm like, I don't even know why that person didn't. I don't know if that person actually didn't hand it back the gifts, because that's what I would have done. I was like, look, I don't need this because you can't buy my loyalty and my friendship. I'm either your friend or I'm not. Like that's it, you know. But that's
Right.
like a really extreme example of poison chalice when you actually have the money to actually really do it. But people do it in very you know, you don't need money to do a poison chalice, to give a poison chalice.
Yeah. Anytime you're calling back your generosity, just don't. When you're like, well, I did this for you, when you're trying to get someone out of something, just don't. If they're not going to do that for you, they're not going to do it for you. Ask someone else.
I've always been allergic to that. When people have done it, like to me, I'm like, I wouldn't do that to you. So no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just things like it feels really wrong. And you mentioned about, because you talk about attachment styles in platonic. Are they the same attachment styles as, you know, the one, because you mentioned about anxious and stuff? Mm-hmm. Is it the same attachment style that we have in the other book, Attached? Do we have the same things in friendships, like anxious, avoidant?
Same attachment styles, similar impacts.
Can you have could you do like a brief just overview for those who don't know the actual attachment styles in dating as well? Could you don't mind just like briefly say what the different ones are?
Of course. Yeah. So basically your attachment style develops based on your early relationships with your caregivers. And it's basically your template, how you assume people are responding to you at any given time. And they can change again throughout life as you have more relationships, but there's three major ones. One is anxious. That means you think people are going to abandon you, that they don't really like you. You have trouble bringing up your needs because you, again, think people will abandon you. You take things really personally because you, again, think people are going to leave you. And you tend to have more volatile friendships, right? You are able to develop really close friendships, but they just tend to be more erratic. And then you have people that are avoidant, which means they're very uncomfortable with intimacy and connection. Their friends feel like they don't really actually know them, right? That you're just like a party friend to them. They don't like mixing friends because that might involve too much intimacy for them. They're allergic to vulnerability. They're bad at receiving other people's vulnerability. And they basically just feel very threatened by intimacy and very suffocated by it very easily because they grew up in a household with a lot of emotional neglect. And then you have secure people. And according to the research, they're best at initiating friendships. They assume other people like them. They have, the most positive and optimistic views of friendships. They're comfortable getting very close to people, comfortable bringing up needs, working through conflict, and they have the best outcomes. They tend to just have more friendships, deeper friendships, longer lasting friendships. And so my book, Platonic, is basically about how can we become more secure in our friendships.
And is it like when we're dating where like an anxious person would be attracted to an avoidant person, but two avoidant or two anxious people can't really match? They repel each other?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure there's enough research in the context of friendship to be able to say, but I
Mm.
will say that, I think an anxious and avoidant friendship pair can also be natural because, they say with avoidance, there's just not enough glue for them to continue their relationships unless there's someone anxious who's really trying, even though they're not giving, they're not
Yeah,
giving them much. And
yeah.
if you're secure, you'd probably just move on. So we definitely can see that dynamic. I mean, I've heard of things, when you hear the term trauma bonding, where everybody's being super vulnerable very early on about their trauma, and then the friendship is super intense and you don't really have a foundation, but everybody's, super invested in it. Anyway, that I can imagine happens more with like anxious friendship pairs.
And do you have people with friendships who are anxious slash avoidant, the mix?
Well, yeah, because how your attachment style shows up can depend on the other person's dynamic. So
Mm.
if you have someone who's super avoidant, it kind of makes sense to feel a little insecure about yourself. Or if you have someone who's very anxious and they want all of your time and they're asking so much from you, it kind of makes sense to want to pull away a little bit. So these can vary very much based on the type of relationship you're entering.
And I guess I feel, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel also like maybe for some people, I would come across avoidant or be avoidant because I'm not invested in them and they may be more invested in me or vice versa. And for some people, I come across anxious because I'm more invested in them and they're not invested in me.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a reality. It is like
Yeah.
it's a template inside of us, but it's also a normal dynamic when someone's pulling away for you to want to pull in closer and vice versa.
And I guess like for now, like, I don't know if it would be the same for avoidant person, but I guess if you're an anxious friend, if you actually build a friendship with someone who's secure, it may help you become less anxious because that person would actually invest a bit more back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's how our new relationships can change our template, right? We get this evidence that, oh, maybe someone's not going to abandon me. This person keeps showing up and they keep staying there. But what's hard is that if you have anxious attachment, you will actually filter the world in a way that matches your attachment style. When people are safe, you might not register it, you might not recognize it. And when they are
Oh.
harmful, it's going, your brain is taking it in so much more strongly. So that's why one suggestion I have for anxious people and probably avoidant people too is that when your friends are affirming you, when they are showing you that they like you, when you are successful in working through conflict or being able to express a need, just make sure you pause and take that in and focus on it so that it can actually affect your brain wiring and your nervous system wiring if you can do that.
Right, because like if you anxious and see the world this way, it means that you feel like no one cares. And you may not see the ones who actually do care. Is that?
Exactly, Angie. And the world is so ambiguous, right? So
Yeah.
we don't actually know if people care or not. So most of the ways that we're interpreting things are based off of our own hardwiring and what's happened in our past.
Yeah. No, that was really interesting actually you said that. So it's almost like I guess like the advice I'm taking from this is basically look at the hard facts. Don't let your emotions get the best of you.
Yeah, and like definitely that. And also like make sure you take in and register moments of safety. Like that's why I say to assume people like you, and that's going to make you take in those moments when people like you, and it's going to make people like you more. It's just like a very positive cycle because that is a way to change your attachment style, right? Because both anxious and avoidant people, they don't have that belief. They think other people are going to reject them or betray them, and so that is a way to gain more security over time.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And actually, that actually kind of like already, I feel already answers the other question I had for you, which was like, the value of a soul, because I feel like we're discarding friendships more easily maybe now than 20 years ago because, you have like the friends, the friendship apps, social media, people are, I don't know, online all the time. People think they can just make friends just like that. Like it makes people a bit disposable, like the dating pool a little bit is.
Yeah.
But in effect, actually, maybe that's more a reflection of the anxiety, an anxious attachment or avoiding attachment in the sense that actually, if you're not making the effort with the people who actually are showing you their care, of
Right.
course, there's going to be you may actually end up disposing of people more as well because you're actually investing in people who are being avoidant and not on those who are actually being there for you. So you're getting like a skewed view of reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Angie. It's like not only is your reality skewed based on your attachment style, but you're actually creating the relationships that match your attachment style,
Right?
right?
Yeah, you're basically proving your own
Exactly.
insanity, or like your not your own struggle. Is like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like with dating, you know, yeah, you sometimes just keep manifesting the same crap because that's part of your belief system and how what you're attracted to.
exactly. And familiarity is a hell of a drug. You know, what's familiar to us, we are drawn to, whether it's healthy or not.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting because we are so. I'd never really truly realized it until, like, you know, not that long ago, really. But we are so deeply programmed and conditioned. It's very hard to really see things for what they are if you're not clear on how to really listen to yourself and really know who you are when that whenever that the only way I can say it is like whenever your higher self or God or whatever it is you believe in is actually speaking through you, or giving you a sign of
Yep,
this is the way, because the rest, the programming, the conditioning, the wounds, the triggers, the toxicity is all layered on top of you, and it's very hard to see through that fog. And then that's why, like, sometimes it's happened before, people sometimes have a reaction to me and I'm like, I have no idea where this is coming from. Like what they're
absolutely.
saying, I don't even know what they're talking about, because they're coming from their wounds, their triggers, and they want me to change my behavior. They want to control the environment so they can feel better. And
Yep,
it's a bit like what we have with our parents, right? I mean, I know with my mom sometimes I'll get upset with her, and she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Angela. I have no idea what you. And I'm like, well, yeah, this just happened, like, and you know, and and because it's very hard to separate those that programming, conditioning triggers when it's so close, such an old relationship, right?
absolutely.
And I think it's that's the thing, is like it really is like really getting in touch with yourself and getting real with your bullshit, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's like just based off building off of what you're saying, like secure attachment is seeing reality clearly. It's not
Mm,
seeing people through the your triggers and through your wounds. It's actually being able to acknowledge when people are harmful or hurtful and when they're not, and it's, you know, a reflection of your own pain. So that I think is another draw of secure attachment, is being more in touch with the reality of things.
yeah. Yeah. So I feel like when it's really skewed, when it's not based in reality, is when your head is taking over. It's all these thoughts, like it's
Mhm.
crazy energy, right? Whereas like it's like this instant, like very quiet, wow. I just saw it's like this flicker in their eyes. And
Yep.
you see that enough times, and then all of a sudden it comes out, like they'll blurt out something, and you're just like, wow, I knew it all along.
Hmm.
You know, like sometimes we don't listen to that. We just go, ah, no, it's just in my mind. Or, but it's, yeah, it's knowing that difference is not always easy.
It's very hard, yeah.
Mm. And so I guess like what I want to ask before we round off is like how do we know when it's time to break up a friendship, or do we need to
Yeah.
fight for it? Like how do we know the difference between, how do we know?
I say take a step back from the friendship in this moment and look at the larger story of the friendship. Is this a hard moment in an otherwise positive, loving relationship? Or is this a hard moment that has reflected a history of hard moments, right? And if it's like this is a chapter of a book that's been damned from the beginning, then it might be a really good reason to end the friendship. Whereas if you're like, this friendship was mostly very good and I felt very cared for, but now we're just going through a hard time, then I think the friendship might be worth fighting for.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. It actually does really make sense.
Yeah.
Marissa, before I ask you the finishing thoughts, there's two questions I ask every single one of my guests. Is there anything that you would like to add, or anything I didn't get round to ask you? I may have interrupted you. Like, is there anything that you wanted to say before I ask you the finishing thoughts and where we can find you?
Yeah, I would say I think you asked really good questions, Angie, and this was very comprehensive. I'll first say that. But one thing that I didn't mention was that there's this theory called the theory of inferred attraction, which basically means people like people who they think like them. And I think so many of us, when it comes to friendship, we're just so in our own heads, and we're so thinking about how people are impacting us, and we're not thinking about how we're impacting them. But fundamentally, the people that are best at friendship, they're not necessarily the most charismatic or entertaining. They just make other people feel like they matter, and they make other people feel like they belong. And there's this theory called risk regulation theory, which basically argues that we decide how much to invest in a relationship based on our view of how likely we are to get rejected. So when you're someone who can make other people feel like they belong, you tell people it's safe for you to invest in me because I'm not going to reject you. And so that just will help you belong too. So I think just I want my message to be like, think a lot more about how you're impacting people and how you can make other people feel like they belong if you yourself want to belong.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah, make someone else feel they belong if you want to feel that you belong. It's like
Yep,
they say, like, understand before seeking to be understood.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like give what you want to get. Like it's just it's funny. That's actually a rule that can really go around in everything.
Hmm.
Even in business, like what do you want to get out of the business? Then put it in. Like put in the work that's gonna give you what you need for it to happen. Like what are the actions you need to take, right? It's a simple equation actually.
Absolutely.
But it's not as obvious or glaringly obvious in the day to day, right? We always like expecting stuff, feeling entitled, or feeling like, oh, they're not investing in me, so why am I gonna, you know?
Exactly. We're feeling hurt, and being hurt makes us kind of focused on ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and we don't realize actually how we're impacting others or how we come across because we have the best view in the room. We're not looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting you mentioned about charisma because for me, because there's a lot of different, I think there's a few different definitions of charisma, but for me, someone who actually has charisma is not necessarily the loudest person in the room, and it's that is that person who actually makes you feel that you matter.
Exactly.
Then you'll hear people say, oh, they've got charisma. And the only reason why people say that is because they felt like they were seen. As I heard someone say one time, I'm gonna have to try that as a test and see what happens. But someone said that if a man and a woman are on a date and the woman says, wow, like he's quite impressed with the intellect of the man, for example, she says, oh my God, you're so smart. Like, but genuinely, like she's impressed, right? The man will automatically feel that she's intelligent.
That's interesting.
I don't know if it's true, but it's kind of stuck in my mind because I kind of think it's kind of sweet and endearing that, of course, if someone thinks you're intelligent, you're going to think they're intelligent because they're like,
Yeah.
they're making the right decision.
You're like, yeah, they know I'm intelligent. They must be smart.
Yeah, it's like there's this guy at work who always laugh at all my jokes. He just gets me,
Hmm.
and I'm like, that is the best thing since sliced bread to me at work. I don't really know him that well. He doesn't really know me that well, but because we laugh, I'm like, yeah, he gets it. He's cool, and that's basic. It's a basic thing.
Yep.
So Marisa, thank you so much, so much. Really, really, really love having this conversation with you. And I'm gonna ask you the finishing thoughts that I ask every one of my guests, and there's two of them. And the first one is, what do you wish you learned or already knew at 18? But like on a cellular level, what do you wish you really, really knew at 18?
I wish I knew to feel my feelings rather than be threatened by them.
Ah, yes, yes. Would you suppress them or would you just like
Suppress them, definitely, hoping they'd go away, but now I know that doesn't work.
No, it's like a ticking bomb.
Exactly. It took me a PhD in psychology to find out that you can't avoid your feelings. You have to just spend time and release them.
Yeah, and that is such an important thing. Um, it is so healthy to actually be okay with feeling whatever you're feeling, and it's not easy.
Yep.
Especially in certain cultures, but definitely in this day and age. And so, and the second one is, what do you not put up with anymore?
I don't really put up with, like, I guess, one sided friendships, being the one to always have to reach out and not getting that same investment from other people. I think, luckily I'm in a place where I have a great community. So if I'm going to add someone new to my life, they need to make me feel like I'm valued too.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, I love that. Actually, I'm the same. That's why. But I need to actually check myself a little bit after this conversation that I make sure I invest in the friendships as well before I go. I'm out. Yeah. So Marisa, please tell us, where can people find you? Where can they get your book? How can they work with you? Like, give us all the good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my book comes out in the US September 6th, and in the UK a week later. It's called Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends, in the US and in the UK. Platonic: How Understanding Your Attachment Style Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. We'll give you all the science of making and keeping friends. If you need more tips, you can take a free quiz on my website that assesses your strengths and weaknesses as a friend. That's at drmarisagfranco.com, MARISAGFRANCO. And that's also my Instagram handle, where I share all the tips on friendships at Dr Marisa G. Franco.
Can I just ask you, it's a bit cheeky of me, but I can ask, there's two different titles, one for the US, one for the UK. Was it like a market research because of how people, the words they use or how they understand friendship, like that the titles are different? Like, how did you decide that?
Yeah. Angie, I wish I decided that, but your publishers have some control in the matter. So it was kind of more their decision.
I was just picturing like a think tank that says, no, in the US that's how it's gonna land, but in the UK, no, you gotta change it, because it kind of makes me laugh. I kind of like that. But really appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation. Honestly, thank you so much, Marisa. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to share. Angie, one thing I realized I forgot to mention. Could I just add something to my title and information?
Yeah.
I was going to share too. I also do speaking engagements on connection and belonging in the workplace or outside of the workplace. So I'm available for that.
And do they go onto your website for that to get?
Yeah, they can go onto my website for that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I really appreciate you, Marisa.
Thanks really so much for all your great questions.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for Dish It Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.